In this episode, I chatted with Adam Baggs, the CEO of Maplewave. He works with telco operators across 40 different countries and plays a pivotal role in their digital transformation projects. We talked about how telcos are fast-tracking their digital efforts and even touched on Maplewave's own evolution as a company. Adam, thanks for joining today. Why don't we start out and tell us a little bit about what Maplewave does and what you're in charge of?
Sure, yeah. So I'm proud to be the CEO of Maplewave. So ultimately, I'm in charge of financial direction, biz dev, partnerships, the typical things that a CEO would be in charge of. And what our firm does is we're a software company that's aimed almost exclusively at digital transformation projects for telcos.
That's awesome. And so you're kind of right at the front line of everything you guys have been focused on over the last number of years with your telcos has become a lot more real in the last couple of months. How have you helped your customers get through these last, not even a few weeks now, the last couple of months? Effectively, we had to start with helping ourselves. And what I mean there is we had to get Maplewave solid. A lot of firms, obviously, at the beginning of this, were trying to sort out who they were and making sure that they had, the appropriate resources and funds and whatnot in order to make sure that they could execute on all the things that they needed to. So, the number one thing we did is make sure that we took care of our people and took care of our, ultimately at the end of the day, our customers as well. But we had to do that quickly. So the main part for us was responding quickly, ensuring that everyone was able to do work, whether that's our customers able to do work on our software and on our platform, or whether that's our folks being able to work safely from home. So some of the things we did there was, we very quickly created pop-ups on our website to communicate, the comms to our clients and partners. We very quickly escalated some of the items within our strategy. So helping some of the other customers understand other ways in which they could use the product based on, the new sales trend, new transactions were happening. So things like that. Essentially responding quickly is the short answer. Cool. And any cool stories about this one kind of unique solution that you guys came up with any unnamed partners of yours or customers of yours?
I think the most amazing thing, just in general, of the whole start to the COVID situation for everybody, is how wonderful the world responded in a lot of ways. So there was a lot of innovation and a lot of goodwill that was happening out there. So we have customers that are primarily, their number one item is prepaid mobile. So as a result of that, they have to make sure that they can get to those customers who can no longer come into the stores and make payments, so they can keep using the device and keep talking to their families and have access to the network. So happy to say that our solution was part of a unique sort of fun way that folks did it. So the best way that I can describe it is I remember as a kid, folks in North America will remember this. This is a customer outside of North America, but the bookmobile, and the book would come up to your community, out to the place and get a book. Yeah. So essentially what this carrier did is they created so they built a bus, and the bus provided social distancing for the employees on the bus and allowed folks to come up to the outside to make payments. Because of our solution, we could port things immediately, off the devices inside the bus. So essentially not a book mobile. Prepaid top-up mobile that we were part of to keep the flow going in certain areas. So it was good.
And that really would have been the only way for this telco's customers to probably top up on their rate plans and everything.
Yeah, in certain regions, certainly. Yeah, it was one of the very quick responses that was out there. And again, we can't take full credit for it. It was just fun to be a part of it.
That's cool. And so it kind of turn the page on, really looking at digital transformation in telco. I think Maplewave has been at the forefront of that over the last number of years. Just the ongoing chats you and I have had. How would you describe telco's level of digital maturity?
It depends. I mean, there's some that are far ahead, and I can give you examples of that at any time, really. But there's some that are doing a lot of work in that space and have done a good job of managing their channel strategy and ensuring that there's that there's one customer experience for all those different channels. And there's ones that are a little bit behind. I suppose that'd be no different than any industry in any vertical anywheres, where there's some that are further ahead than others. But yeah, so in general, I would describe it as, average, I suppose, because there's some that need a lot of help and some that are close.
Now, knowing that you're a global company, do you see any glaring differences between operators in North America versus the rest of the world, or even in different markets, i.e. prepaid versus postpaid?
I mean, it's sort of interesting, because, your first instinct, certainly, I mean, we're both Canadians, but your first instinct when you think about North America is that from a technological standpoint, we'd be ahead. So Maplewave deals in, like, we're all over the world in 40 plus countries and multiple continents. And it's surprising because there's certain regions that, yes, they have, let's say, less infrastructure, but because of that, they're further ahead on that on the digital journey. They've leapfrogged certain legacy technologies, right? So if you think of banking, there's certain regions that have that their mobile banking far surpasses that of North America. So when you think about certain operators, we have some in the Middle East, for instance, that have a mobile wallet, they have self-care app, and it's connected into a subscription media product model. So it's, they have a whole variety of things. So, so I would say North America in general isn't depending on which item you're selecting, isn't as ahead as what you might think.
So in saying that, any great examples that a lot of the North American telcos could learn from?
The mobile wallet is a big one. That's the one where, we're behind, and frankly, almost a decade behind from certain markets. So, so there's, obviously we've done a great job of payment integration. So when you go into a retail channel, whether it's through their e-com or the self-care app or the bricks and mortar retail, you can obviously make payments, but you're doing that through a traditional model. And there's some telcos that are striving to become essentially a financial institution. So if you think of if you think about what postpaid is, essentially you're providing a financial service because you're providing a service, postpaid. So there's not a lot of difference there between that and becoming a financial institution. But there's telcos that are, that are further ahead than others in this, and most of those are outside of North America.
Got it. That's cool. And so, when you think of your one example with the mobile bus, there's that localized approach to customer interactions. How do you think operators can balance that customer experience with digital transformation?
They have to not neglect physical. So, and I'm not saying that because we have a history in physical retail, but you can't neglect any channel when you're going through that journey, the digital journey. So they're absolutely, all of the channels are an important part of that, or a center of that. So, this is obviously going to create some form of change, behavioral change in how people shop and what they expect from the physical locations. But they can't ignore the physical channel. It's an intricate part of the whole solution. And we have digital products that have nothing to do with the physical location, other than the fact that when you combine them now all of a sudden you have, the inventory, and no matter where I'm going, the person recognizes me and knows me as a consumer, and no matter which channel I'm in. So there's that aspect. And on the other side is that we can't ignore, and we certainly have to invest in the soft skills and the training of the channels and the people. So, so it's one thing to have somebody who understands, the telco's product, be able to sell the phone or the home plan or whatever. It's another thing to understand how that consumer is interacting with you through all those different channels, and be able to help synchronize that experience when the consumer walks in the door or when they're on the phone or whatever.
You and I were chatting a few days ago just about what some of the operators have been doing over the last couple of months, where it's redeploying retail reps into call centers and really looking at that mix of retail versus other true omni-channel interactions with customers. Where, if you had a crystal ball, where do you see that going over the next 6-8 months? I wouldn't say the next couple months, but in 6-8 months, when things start to become a bit more normal, whatever that is, what do you see the role of each of those channels playing?
Yeah, you're a pivotal role. And I think the interesting part here is Maplewave strategy. We call it, internally our name for that is, I should say it's also external. It's all over our website as well, but it's the Transact Anywhere model. So essentially anywhere is where that transaction is happening. That's where our products and service want to behave and operate in. So all of the various channels have a role to play within that. And it all depends on where that interaction starts. So, so if you think about where the behaviors are right now with a lot of us, shopping from home,
So we'll shop from home. And so the role of the channel that is e-com, or the role of the channel that is self-care, that has to be one that understands me, recognizes me when I sign in, knows what I already have, so it's not offering me something that I don't already, or that I've already. But it also has to be able to very quickly recognize where I am, know which location nearby if I wanted to pick it up immediately, if that's my option. So if I'm to use now the physical channel, and then you have curbside pickup and those kinds of things. So even after COVID, you're going to want to use like a physical retail location. It can be a sales distribution center, or it effectively could be a warehouse, a small warehouse location where folks can go pick up their devices that are close by. And then you can use that again to start another conversation to increase sales or whatever. So it depends on where the journey starts, but the whole thing, no matter where that journey starts or ends, the channel itself is almost irrelevant. The whole thing should operate no matter where you start or finish within that.
Got it. And so when we talked about some of your carrier partners and even ours switching retail reps into work from home, where do you see this concept of Transact Anywhere really helping with localization of customer interaction? So you think of, in the past, there's been a lot of offshore call centers that have been supporting a lot of the major operators. I still think there's going to be a further shift towards localization, make sure that people know where they're buying and who they're buying from. How does Transact Anywhere help with that?
Yeah, where the products come from. So if you're talking about, understanding the items that are within your supply chain and wanting to own and control that, it's a key component of what Maplewave is. One of the things that separates us from folks who also play in our space as providers to telcos is that we go all the way down to the supply chain side. So understanding where those products are, where they are in the supply chain, where they've come from, ensuring that you have enough on hand, and et cetera, that entire thing, we can help somebody, we can certainly help the telco get to the point that they own their own supply chain and have full visibility to that. Additionally, the Transact Anywhere strategy, essentially when you're talking about, how you create an experience for those folks at a local level. So you can have, excuse the plug for Amazon here, but you can have the Amazon experience with our Transact Anywhere strategy. So essentially, right from supply chain through to whether it's e-com, whether it's in store, any and all of those channels as the consumer goes through, whatever they're trying to do, whether that's a top up or a bill pay, etc.
That's cool. And I think that's where you guys have that unique end-to-end solution where you do have the distribution and the supply chain, as you said, right up to the front line of whether it's call center, digital, or retail.
Right.
Which ties me into the next question around, the amount of change with any business over the last couple of months has been dramatic, especially in the telco or operator world. I think it's started to force a reboot or speed up of digital transformation. What are some of those tactical projects or initiatives that you think are critical for immediate success with those operators as we shift to whatever the new normal is over the next number of months?
Sure. Yeah. I think the first thing that everybody has to recognize is that, nothing has really changed. Other than everything, but but nothing has really changed in the sense of moving towards a digital transformation or a digital strategy, except for time or speed. Right. So, we were, like, I'll say we as a global world was methodically moving towards a digital landscape. You could see it coming, which is why the Transact Anywhere strategy was around before COVID. And so really the only thing that's happened here is, the speed. So some of those things that we would have built either product or process for collectively between whether a telco does it on their own or a service provider like Maplewave does it. Some of those things may not happen now, because they're just not necessary as we go through and speed ourselves through to the finish line of this. But so understanding that, first of all, that you're not actually redoing an entire strategy. You're simply looking at what parts of that strategy should you escalate and should be invested in further so you can deploy faster. So first thing is that. The second thing is taking the easiest and most impactful delivery options. Would be the recommendation that we would have. So, you can talk about things like, if you're not already paperless, then you should demo be paperless pretty fast and go get that done. And that's easy.
So that's something that we can deliver within weeks and deploy onto into any telco globally. And then you look at things like self-care apps and deploying bill pay or SIM vending and product vend machines and things like of that nature. So there's things that you can do relatively quickly. Now that your physical channel has obviously very little customer flow right now.
Yep.
And not all of those things that you're doing that you would do quickly now have zero throwaway. They're all going to maintain and be an intricate part of your overall channel strategy. And if you pick a vendor similar to Maplewave, then you would be in a situation where all of that work, it ties together.
So as telcos, or even large retailers for that matter, in the telco space start thinking of digital, what are some common pitfalls to avoid when it comes to this digital transformation for their business?
I think I hate blaming the IT folks because we're an IT company, so I'll be very careful there when I say that. So sorry, everybody, I don't mean it. But no, I think the big pitfall is feeling that you have constraints that you don't have. So in other words, what I mean is that there's a lot of feeling that you're contractually obligated to certain IT vendors that you have today. There's certain vendors that that firms rely heavily on, certain very large vendors that they rely heavily on, and they have a sense that they can't remove a portion of their service to bring in, let's say, best of breed provider like your firm or our firm into their space. So recognizing that that's not a constraint, that's the first one. Because if you pick a company that knows how to integrate well and do that, and understands that space very well and understands the architectural ecosystem that is a telco, then you're in good hands and you're fine to do that. So that's the first one. And the second one is ensuring that your people are ready for it. So, and this gets to the point where I talked before about one of the main things is around ensuring that you train your folks on what transformation means and how to interact with customers in those various channels. So ensuring that you have somebody that can help you step by step through that. Yep. So they can identify it.
Do you think deployments should be as long as they have been in the past? Or, does the last 2 months kind of really show that with the right focus, there should not be as much fear about change because people can adapt quite quickly?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a point to that. It depends. It depends on the deployment. I use the paperless as an example. That's something that we can get out and running within weeks. It's not a large deployment. It's nothing that we should be afraid of. And if you're a telco that has a laundry list of items that you have to get through in order to make yourself digital, then instead of creating one massive RFP that's going to be an 18-month project or a 2-year project, you could very easily start peeling off portions of that and get there quickly. So yes is the short answer to that question. But then you can also, when you start thinking about there's again, if you pick the firms that know how to integrate properly and have a history with it, have adopted the TM form framework and things of that nature that they know play within that space, then you should be able to, as the head of IT in those areas and those telcos and those firms that are involved in that, you should be able to create projects that you can stand behind the timelines of. So it's going to be an important part for them all. One of the things around timing is some of them are long time based projects. That's the unfortunate side of it. There is if you're a telco, and it's like anything, it's like it's not the tool, it's how you use it. So at the end of the day, you're still going to want to, as those telcos, ensure that you're able to capture the essence of who they are and who they are to their customers within that deployment. So those not talking about customization, but those configurations to ensure that they have an individuality with the various vendors that they select is important and can add time, but that time I think is an important part of the project.
Yeah, that makes sense. This next question, as much as we've spoken, I didn't realize this was even a thing that Maplewave had put together. So your team mapped out over 42 different omnichannel journeys that telcos can leverage to expand their service. Right. That's incredible. What would you recommend for a telco that's very early in their omni journey?
Seek the advice. That's the fast and easy way to answer that question. So we have and I suppose I'm saying seek the advice, and then I'm about to plug the folks offer the advice to folks, but whether it's our amplifier team or it's an internal hire or it's something, but our amplifier consulting side are experts in this, and I've done deployments in 70 plus countries, I believe is the number, and I probably undersold that number. So sorry to the guys that are and gals that are on that team. But I mean, seek the advice. There's ways in which you can balance a project between system, training, process. There's a variety of things that go into that, and it doesn't always mean a massive IT rip and tear. A lot of it can be very small changes and quick changes that can have a major impact. So again, I think that portion of it has been a very big learning lesson for a lot of the folks that have worked with our amplifier team.
Makes sense. And you don't need to create something from scratch when you have a lot of experts globally that have been there, done that, and probably share a lot of lessons of what to avoid throughout the process.
That's right.
And so what about a telco that's more mature in their Omni journey? Anything that you'd suggest doing differently?
Well, they could still map out the detail, right? So, this is, at the end of the day, whether you're more mature through that process, you have a project to execute on. So, if you're immature in the process, clearly you have a bigger project.
Yep.
You probably have an education portion of that for everybody to get on so they understand where they're headed. But even if you're mature, you still have, and in a lot of cases, it's that last mile that's the hardest, right? So, that's true in fitness training, and it's true in a lot of different things. The last few pounds are the hardest, and in order to get yourself, even as a mature omni-channel firm, again, approaching it where you're taking, a methodical approach and mapping out the detail is an important part.
When you think of people and digital transformation, as an operator, how do you sell the vision of digital to the rest of your leadership team? It's probably pretty easy right now, but months ago, how do you sell that vision, and is it differently now?
The world changes. That's the main thing. And so the one thing, as you said, right now it's an easy sell because the world has in the behaviors of both the workplace and the shopping behaviors of consumers and all the rest. For all of us, there's a lot of change.
Yep.
I'm talking about the need to leverage technology in a way that we didn't before, or at least that we recognize that it could be leveraged, but we didn't fully leverage it because we weren't forced to like we are today. So it starts with education. It starts with regular discussions with everybody so they understand, the different viewpoints that are attached to it. But I think when you look at Maplewave, if we take, and a lot of firms say this, they say it because it works and it's true. If you take a customer standpoint, like a customer first standpoint, and you look at it from that end, and when we say customer, we don't necessarily mean the telco themselves. We're talking about their end customer.
For sure.
What is that? What is the digital tool or the process that should be there? How do you humanize that in a way that makes sense for everybody? So so they understand the value that we're creating for the end consumer and ultimately again for the telco themselves.
That makes a ton of sense, and I think that's something we've been striving for as well at Statflo, is make sure that it's customer first. That's the end subscriber on the network. The biggest fail point is usually the Frontline when it comes to new technology. How do you combat that natural fear of change typically seen with Frontline folks?
Yeah, so inside of so the short answer is training. That's the short answer. So you have to make sure that your folks understand, that you're not looking to, and I'll use two examples here. Let's first use the example that quite clearly, if you're in the physical retail space, and even if you were very good at your role, and you're looking at what's happening in the retail, that portion of the channel, you're going to be concerned, even if you're a high performer, and you're going to be concerned about what's going to happen here now, what's going to happen to the physical channel, and what does that mean to me? So if you combine the channels, and then you're communicating and ensuring that your folks are trained in a way that they can work within any channel and work with the customer within those channels, then you can take that high valued employee and leverage them in different areas. So that becomes part of the conversation. So if you want to make sure that your staff are instead of being fearful of change, are excited by it, you show them that look, this isn't about saving money by reducing headcount. This is about actually growing you as an individual and training you to do more within the channels. So you may be selling you might be selling virtually now. You may be selling through the phone or through apps or various methods in which you'll be interacting with the customers. And that's where you guys have nailed that with your one-to-one outreach programs. So there's a variety of ways in which telcos can do that, and the way that our firm helps with that is through our training program. So we have an e-learning platform that we provide to telcos to help them build educational programs for their staff, so their staff are digital ready.
That's cool. And I think it's, again, the last couple of months has proven that people can adapt quite quickly when there's the right focus, effort, and singular vision of what needs to get done. So I think that's coupled with the training piece of, hey, this is the most important thing, and hopefully that doesn't go away over the next number of months when there's 3,000 different priorities kind of hitting those frontline folks at the same time.
Yeah. How far do you stand from the plexiglass, right?
Yes, exactly. So Adam, you and I have chatted a bunch of times, about how MMS at the time and now Maplewave had to pivot back during the financial crisis. Talk about that, and what was your process to go from the business you guys had back in late 2008, 2009 to where it is today?
Sure, yeah.
And what were those kind of key decision points along the way?
Sure. So, any financial moment, whether it's a financial crisis, this will be determined as one, obviously, that we're in today, and the one in 2008, but even really great ones. If you're on the positive side of the ledger, and and your company explodes, those are moments for strategy, for strategic moments for you, to make it's pivotal change moments for you as a firm to decide, who you want to be. And so for us at that time, we were starting to dabble in, enterprise direct telco sales, but it wasn't a definitive strategy. And a line that we use across our company today all the time is that strategy matters, because there's a lot of firms out there that do retail, but they play in the horizontal retail space. And when you sell directly to telcos at the enterprise level, and you're supporting all of their variant channels, that strategy impacts your product, it impacts your process, it impacts the fact that we have a consulting side of our operation and amplifier. We wouldn't have it otherwise, self-care products, those types of things. So the decision point back in those years was, what type of firm, we did the classic where you look at your strengths and you decide, and you look at your weaknesses, and then you decide, how are you going to leverage those strengths, or how are you going to strengthen those weaknesses to become strengths, and then decide on what you're going to do. And one of the things that one of our core competencies is integration at the time, and the other one was customization. Now configuration, because of how we built the platform. So our ability to be able to integrate in and to be able to provide a form of configuration to our customers meant that we had and were aimed more at the larger enterprise. And then when we looked at the market as a whole, it was very clear that there was going to be some consolidation globally on how telcos are going to be selling. So there's going to be far less independence. Whether you agree with it or not, it was a reality that was coming. So like the larger retailers, we're going to play a bigger role in this. So, you can look at the larger retailers now that back then in 2008 didn't have much of a play in telco, and now they do. They all have, individual sales arms inside their bricks and mortar retail locations. So we could see that trend happening. And then it was at that moment that we decided to say, okay, let's continue all the work that we're doing, leverage our strengths, and then point the strategy definitively towards that enterprise sales.
That's cool. And that's a pretty big change. I know, you're focused on just dealer channel, telco in general, and shifting to the large telco carrier side. Any learnings that you've had over the last 10, 12 years since that decision?
Yeah, strategy costs more and takes longer than you think. But no, the one thing I want to be very clear on is that, inside that channel, our dealers. And so today we still service dealers, but they're part of the telco channel because, of course, telcos have their corporate doors, they have their independent doors, you have third party, you also have digital channels in the like. So the learning there was the importance, like early on, the importance of governance, the importance of those types of things, which are costly items to ensure that a firm that at the time the size of Maplewave was could be seen as a trusted partner for a large telco. So there's a lot of that work that had to be done to ensure that we were in a position where we could be a trusted firm for those. And that was a part that not took us by surprise, but I think the time and the expertise required and the cost in some instances, we underestimated at times.
So talk to me about that. So you talked about that you need a lot more process and structure in place and governance as you started to sell into larger telcos globally. How did you manage that, being perceived as a smallish company from Canada on the east coast of Canada? That makes it even perceived to be a smaller local thing out in the east coast. How did you overcome that, and how did you sell the vision of Maplewave or MMS at the time being a legit company that should be contending?
Yeah, in two parts really, and neither one of them are would be any kind of trade secret to anybody. So the very first one is you have to build trust. So you do that through a personal relationship. So if people know that Maplewave was going to stand behind what it is that they're doing, and so at the end of the day, even if you're selling to the largest firm on the planet, you're selling to an individual, and that individual is making a choice, and that individual could be, I'll use the word individual, but it could be a small team. Those folks are making a decision, and they need to believe that the decision they're making is one that they can stand behind. So I never felt that the issue would be around functionality for us. It was always going to be around, it was those old classic lines that no one ever got fired for picking IBM or Oracle, like those classic sales lines that you hear out there. So we had to put ourselves in that same position where, yes, our functionality is great. Yes, all those things are true, but how do you make sure that the person feels good about that? So the first thing we did was, we relationship sell, and we continue to, and we continue to hold those relationships, and people know that Maplewave will go above and beyond. And, you can speak to any one of our customers and they know that to be true. So that was then turned into use cases, of course, where you start to communicate those things to folks. So it takes the leap of faith, thankfully, of a few customers early who believed in us. And then after that, you turn those into use cases so you can share the story. And then, of course, you have, arguably the most important part of it all, which is the actual execution of it. So, I'm proud to say that Maplewave has effectively 100% delivery percentage when it comes to our projects. We stand behind the things that we say we're going to do. But then that also includes the internal projects. So if you look at, the fact of the certain compliances that we had to have, whether it's ISO or I could rhyme off a handful of acronyms that had some money and expertise that brought to us. Yeah. But we did the work, and we ensured we were there. So, we were one of the very first companies to be, we were SaaS before SaaS was SaaS back in the 90s. We had a very in-depth owned co-location. And then, we very quickly moved to VM when the technology moved in that area. And then we very quickly went to the cloud. We're all we're cloud agnostic. We just happen to choose AWS, for our product. So, ensuring that, when you look at a firm, whether you're small or medium, and that the firm is advancing with the technology, advancing with the governance that's required as part of that helps in that whole trust conversation.
That's great. That's great feedback for anybody trying to start out or take on some of the larger companies in different spaces. Where can our listeners find you if they want to connect?
Maplewave.com is the best place, to find us, and there's contact us sections on there. I'll also throw out the name of Will Gibson. He's our VP of Marketing and Amplifier on that side. So even if you're not interested in contacting him directly, I strongly suggest that you connect with him on LinkedIn and Twitter and the other social media tools that he leverages, because there's a ton of information that he's sharing. And also during COVID, he's offering, and we're offering through Amplifier, some free services there. So it's certainly worth the time to look him up and look Amplifier up.
That's great. Adam, thanks for your time. Look forward to getting this posted. Hopefully next time we chat, I might have a haircut and shave.
Well, you look great, buddy. Thanks. I appreciate it.
As always, thanks for tuning in. If you're a fan of One-to-One, be sure to give us a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast app. Catch you next time.